Letter 40 by Charles Lamb. Nov. 28th, 1798. I can have no objection to your printing Mystery of God, with my name and all due acknowledgments for the honor and favor of the communication. Indeed, 'tis a poem that can dishonor no name. Now, that is in the true strain of modern Modesto Vanitas. But for the sonnet, I heartily wish it, as I thought it was, dead and forgotten. If the exact circumstances under which I wrote could be known or told, it would be an interesting sonnet. But to an indifferent and stranger reader, it must appear a very bald thing, certainly inadmissible in a compilation. I wish you could affix a different name to the volume. There is a contemptible book, a wretched assortment of vapid feelings, entitled Pratt's Gleanings, which hath damned and impropriated the title forever. Pray think of some other. The gentleman is better known, better had he remained unknown, by an ode to benevolence, written and spoken for and at the annual dinner of the Humane Society, who walk in procession once a year, with all the objects of their charity before them, to return God thanks for giving them such benevolent hearts. I like Bishop Bruno, but not so abundantly as your witch ballad, which is an exquisite thing of its kind. I showed my witch and dying lover to Dyer last night, but George could not comprehend how that could be poetry which did not go upon 10 feet, as George and his predecessors had taught it to do. So George read me some lectures on the distinguishing qualities of the ode, the epigram, and the epic, and went home to illustrate his doctrine by correcting a proof sheet of his own lyrics. George writes odes where the rhymes, like fashionable man and wife, keep a comfortable distance of 6 or 8 lines apart, and calls that observing the laws of verse. George tells you, before he recites, that you must listen with great attention, or you'll miss the rhymes. I did so, and found them pretty exact. George, speaking of the dead Ossian, exclaimeth, "Dark are the poet's eyes." I humbly represented to him that his own eyes were dark. Light and many a living bard's besides, and recommended, closed are the poet's eyes. But that would not do. I found there was an antithesis between the darkness of his eyes and the splendor of his genius, and I acquiesced. Your recipe for a Turk's poison is invaluable and truly Marlowish. Lloyd objects to shutting up the womb of his purse in my curse, which for a Christian witch in a Christian country is not too mild, I hope. Do you object? One think there is a strangeness in the idea, as well as shaking the poor like snakes from his door, which suits the speaker. Witches illustrate, as fine ladies do, from their own familiar objects, and snakes and the shutting up of wombs are in their way. I don't know that this last charge has been before brought against 'em, nor either the sour milk or the mandrake babe, but I affirm these be things a witch would do if she could. My tragedy will be a medley and I intend it to be a medley of laughter and tears, prose and verse, and in some places rhyme, songs, wit, pathos, humor, and, if possible, sublimity. At least, it is not a fault in my intention, if it does not comprehend most of these discordant colors. Heaven send they dance not the dance of death. I hear that the two noble Englishmen have parted no sooner than they set foot on German earth, but I have not heard the reason, possibly, to give novelists an handle to exclaim, "Ah me, what things are perfect!" I think I shall adopt your emendation in the dying lover, though I do not myself feel the objection against silent prayer. My tailor has brought me home a new coat lapelled, with a velvet collar. He assures me everybody wears velvet collars now. Some are born fashionable, some achieve fashion, and others, like your humble servant, have fashion thrust upon them. The rogue has been making inroads hitherto by modest degrees, foisting upon me an additional button, recommending gaiters. But to come upon me thus in a full tide of luxury, neither becomes him as a tailor nor the ninth of a man. My meek gentleman was robbed the other day, coming with his wife and family in a one-horse shay from Hampstead. The villains rifled him of 4 guineas, some shillings and halfpence, and a bundle of customers' measures, which they swore were banknotes. They did not shoot him, and when they rode off he addressed them with profound gratitude, making a congee. "Gentlemen, I wish you good night, and we are very much obliged to you that you have not used us ill." And this is the cuckoo that has had the audacity to foist upon me 10 buttons on a side and a black velvet collar, a damned ninth of a scoundrel. When you write to Lloyd, he wishes his Jacobin correspondence to address him as Mr. C.L. Love and respects to Edith. I hope she is well. Yours sincerely, C. Lamb. The poem Mystery of God was, when printed in the annual anthology for 1799, entitled Living Without God in the World. Lamb never reprinted it. It is not clear to what sonnet Lamb refers, possibly that to his sister, printed on page 78, which he himself never reprinted. It was at that time intended to call Southey's collection Gleanings. Lamb refers to the gleanings of Samuel Jackson Pratt, 1749-1814, a very busy maker of books, published in 1795-1799. His Triumph of Benevolence was published in 1786. Southey's witch ballad was The Old Woman of Berkeley. George Dyer's principal works in verse are contained in his poems, 1802, and Poetics, 1812. He retained the epithet dark for Ossian's eyes. Southey's recipe for a Turk's poison I do not find. It may have existed only in a letter. A reference to the poem in letter 39 will explain the remarks about witches' curses. The two noble Englishmen, a sarcastic reference drawn, I imagine, from Palamon and Arcite, were Coleridge and Wordsworth, then in Germany. Nothing definite is known, but they seem quite amicably to have decided to take independent courses. Lloyd's Jacobin correspondence. This is Lamb's only allusion to the attack which had been made by the anti-Jacobin upon himself, Lloyd and their friends, particularly Coleridge and Southey. In The New Morality, in the last number of Canning's paper, they had been thus grouped. And 5 other wandering bards that move in sweet accord of harmony and love, C, DGE and S, TB, Y, L, D and L, B and Co. Tune all your mystic harps to praise Lepox. Lepox being the high priest of theophilanthropy. When The New Morality was reprinted in the Beauties of the Anti-Jacobin, in 1799, a savage footnote on Coleridge was appended, accusing him of hypocrisy and the desertion of his wife and children, and adding, ex uno disse his associates Southey and Lamb. Again, in the first number of the Anti-Jacobin Review and Magazine, August 1798, was a picture by Gilray, representing the worshippers of Lepox, wherein Lloyd and Lamb appeared as a toad and a frog reading their own blank verse, and Coleridge and Southey as donkeys, flourish, dactylics, and sapphics. In September, the federated poets were again touched upon in a parody of the Ode to the Passions. C. Faithful to their mighty dam. C. DGE, S, THYL, D and L, B in splayfoot madrigals of love, soft moaning like the widowed dove, pour side by side their sympathetic notes. Of equal rights and civic feasts and tyrant kings and knavish priests, swift through the land the tuneful mischief floats. And now to softer strains they struck the lyre. They sung the beetle or the mole, the dying kid or ass's foal, by cruel man permitted to expire. Lloyd took the caricature and the verses with his customary seriousness, going so far as to indite a letter to the anti-Jacobin reviewers, which was printed in Birmingham in 1799. Therein he defended Lamb with some vigor. The person you have thus leagued in a partnership of infamy with me is Mr. Charles Lamb, a man who, so far from being a Democrat, would be the first person to assent to the opinions contained in the foregoing pages. He is a man too much occupied with real and painful duties, duties of high personal self-denial, to trouble himself about speculative matters.